We are officially at the halfway point for 2022. We're actually past it. I'm late on doing this video, but that means I need to be doing my halfway through the year tier list, where I go over what I've reviewed for the year and give my hindsight thoughts. This will be books, shows, movies, and I'm really excited to go ahead and bring it on to you. Essentially, this is my way of not only letting you know what reviews you may have missed, but also how my thoughts on these things have changed as times have moved on. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and tier rank the reviews of 2022. So we're actually going to be starting with the most recent book review here on the channel, and that is going to be by Jim Butcher. I've seen a lot of people are quite a bit more positive on this than I am, and I'm happy to see that. Like, I want fandoms to be happy. I'm not a For me personally, this was still an extremely forgettable Dresden Files section. I saw some people talking about how, like, I didn't talk about how it's interesting they're bringing, like, lawyers into supernatural things, and they really liked how it's a bit stepped back into the smaller Dresden stories, but just didn't have necessarily that charm to me. While I'm definitely open for the Dresden Files to take a step back, it took a step back into its worst habits for me, and for that reason, it just wasn't my taste, and I'm gonna be putting it probably like the bottom of C. It wasn't awful, it just wasn't memorable. But we are following that up with one of my favorite books of the year, Gunmetal Gods. And that's either going to be top of A or bottom of S. I'm pretty sure it's going to be bottom of S. I'm a bit of a simp for indie authors doing well, and Zamil's doing pretty well here. So that one I'm going to continue to recommend and preach to people. Gunmetal Gods. It fucks quite good. Then we have Legends and Lattes, which was a slice of life fantasy book I read here on the channel, and it made me fall in love with the genre like immediately. It was so charming. My father is currently reading it and absolutely adoring it, so that is another recommendation. Papa Green also enjoy. For me, this is actually going to go, oh god, how do you compare these two? That's weird. This is like as different as fantasy can get. Holy shit. I'm going to say Legends and Lattes is just below Gunmetal Gods, but they're the same. They're the same quality. Perdido Street Station. I was pretty positive on Perdido Street Station, and it's still one of the most angry books I've read this year. Not necessarily in the like overt anger way, but in terms of like the author feeling like they had something to say and a bit of a political punch behind their writing. I like the energy Perdido Street Station brought to the table, and it's a quality read. Was it my personal favorite in terms of taste? Not necessarily, though it definitely hits really different, and I'm gonna put it really high B, probably. Soulsmith by Will. I'm still not entirely getting the cradle hype, but this is a Dresden situation apparently, where people are saying you just gotta get a bit further, then it gets really, really good. It was fine, and I think I like it probably a little bit less than Perdido Street Station, and I will slowly continue my way through the Cradle series, though at the rate Will writes, he'll probably be putting them out faster than I am actually going to be reading them. The Hunger of the Gods, the follow-up to The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, and I think was even stronger than the first book in this new trilogy from him. This book, woo! If you like epic, hardcore, classic feeling fantasy that has that almost sword and sorcery vibe, but takes in a lot of the best evolutions of the genre recently, Hunger of the Gods ticks all those boxes and so much more. Bombastic, it's poignant, it's thoughtful, it's deep, it's fun. I'm giving Hunger of the Gods top marks. Kushiel's Dart. It's interesting to see the conversation that I low-key sparked in some circles around this book that I kind of peered on in. I loved it. I watch your conversations from a distance, because there is a steamy side to fantasy, and I don't mean steampunk, that is very rich within the genre in terms of its history, its entries, and Kushiel's Dart kind of opened my eyes to how good a lot of these more smutty, for lack of a better word, books can be. It treated sex almost like its magic system, and it was really fascinating to see the highs that Kushiel's Dart really accomplished here. It's got really solid prose, a thought-provoking world and situation and politics. The characters are certainly providing a lot more depth than many authors who are outside of the steamy genre bring to the table, and I'm giving it a solid A rating. I think Kushiel's Dart isn't necessarily required reading for any fantasy fan, but if you want to have a full, well-rounded view of all the genres and angles people are putting quality entries of fantasy into, I would recommend checking out Kushiel's Dart. Saga! I have read so much more of Saga than I've reviewed here on the channel because I just haven't been able to squeeze it into my schedule. But Saga's good. It's solid. I don't think it's as good as the hype around it tends to lean with it, though I certainly get the appeal, the hype, the personality, that is all there. I don't just quite love it. There is something about it that I am not as in love with, though I love certain elements of it, like character especially, more than many other. I think it's a bit weaker than the sum of its parts. Black Tongue Thief. I don't remember this one super well already. It definitely was kind of leaning into what was tried and true for fantasy and adding some fun things to it, but one of the big downfalls of these tier lists for something to be going a bit lower is just it to have already left my brain, though I remember not having too many very large complaints and still thinking it was a good entry all around. I'm gonna put it just above Burrito Street Station. Small Town Problems, a book by a fan that I reviewed here and had a really good time reading. It definitely had a lot of faults, and I really appreciate how many people have commented on that video, how helpful they found the review in terms of how to work on and improve their own writing. So that's fabulous to see, and thank you for those comments. This was probably, I'm not gonna put it D, because I think it is impressive enough for a first outing as an author to bump on up, and it did have those positives I talked about at length. And what's most interesting is this is one that if it was rewritten to have more technically impressive prose and descriptions, it could fire up the list significantly higher. Dune Messiah. Why do people only read Dune and stop? The Dune story, you need to read Messiah and God Emperor of Dune. That's not even a question anymore for me. You must. And yeah, I'm putting that above Kushiel's Dart. It continues to not quite be in my necessarily top taste, but I just have to admire how successful what was started in just Dune is then continued and expanded upon in Dune Messiah and God Emperor Dune. Amazing. Berserk! I didn't want to do every single arc or volume, whatever you call it, for Berserk, because that's going to be a tier of its own someday, but I did want to include Berserk so far for me. It's had stumbles, but Berserk on its own has proven to me that not only is my aversion to grimdark that I started this channel with pretty much entirely dead, but the snobbery I had against manga for so long is just stupid. And medium does not matter. Quality of content, intent of the author, and utilization of medium matter. So yes, Berserk for me is absolutely going to be in the S tier, and I am excited to go even further with it. Obviously it could drop down. People are telling me Golden is the best it gets, and some saying no, it gets even better from there. So, you know, I'm all for it fluctuating wherever it needs to go. The Golden Ass, the quote-unquote first, debatable, but it was the context, the history video I was doing this in a collaboration with, fantasy novel. And this one, I'm going to say something a little bit confusing here. Absolute must read if you're a mega fantasy fan. You need to get into the Golden Ass and read, debatably, the first fantasy novel put out, and you're gonna hate it because it's just structurally a mess. Narratively, there's not even momentum. It's just a stream of consciousness from someone who's having to like explain what a fictional narrative and a perspective is going to be, but it's so fascinating to get through with that. So for me, I'm actually gonna drop this in D because like there's nothing here I'm like, oh yeah, that's wonderful. But I think everyone needs the experience of the Golden Ass. Mouse! Probably the most important in terms of Western graphic novels graphic novels ever put out. I'm talking specifically, obviously, in like what is done in academic settings here in the United States and in Europe. This is the only graphic novel I've ever made to read for school. It's the only graphic novel I've seen continually done that with, and it's for damn good reason. This is not only emotionally devastating to read, accurate and beautiful, but it's tragic, and it's genuinely just a masterpiece. I've read it before. Reading it again this year was a treat. I read it for political, obvious news headline reasons. And yeah, I'm going to be putting Mouse probably just the top of it all. Like, it's one of these things that's just like a seminal, yeah, read Mouse. Cursed Pirate Girl. Cursed Pirate Girl was really beautiful visually, had some fun quirks to it narratively. The character is the character you think you're going to get on just face value of what this series is. And for me, it's probably just going to be top of C. The more distance I've gotten from it, the more I'm just like, yeah, it's quite visually beautiful. But everything beyond that was just kind of fine. And I think people who really love art in graphic novels absolutely should pick it up, but it's not changing the game. Now we have God Emperor of Dune. I think I like Messiah more? No, I like Messiah more. So I'm just going to put it right there. But to me, the first 4 Dune books actually are all just one read. Like, to get the story of Dune, you got to get the first 4 Dune books down. Snow Crash. A parody that happened when Cyberpunk was so young. I had no idea why I thought this book would be so different than it turned out being. Tongue-in-cheek, difficult to get through because of some prose choices. Present tense is just... But it's also just more curious that Neil Stephenson, who just has this very wide range to his writing style, like reading Anathema and then Snow Crash, what the hell? And having a parody of Cyberpunk so early on into when Cyberpunk was getting going, that is actually still, even to where Cyberpunk has evolved now, on the pulse of what the genre's themes are about and everything is really fascinating. So I wasn't having the most fun reading this, but I also very much so appreciate it. I'm probably just going to put it at the top of B for me. Now, transitioning a bit more outside of the literature angle and getting more some of the other mediums we covered here on the channel, I want to talk about The Northman. Robert Eggers is one of my favorite directors working right now. This movie hit so hard. Nicole Kidman's performance is maybe the best I've seen in her career. I just loved what she brought to the role she had. I'm forever in love with Alexander Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy. It just had a few criticisms I could give it, but this kind of just high quality filmmaking is gonna be something I always appreciate, I always enjoy, and will recommend to any fantasy fan. If you're someone who wants to watch the must-watch fantasy films of this year, The Northman has got to be high on your list. And I didn't even expect it to be that fantastical, but this is unabashedly a fantasy film at the end of the day. And I thought that would be much more minimal based on the director's previous work, but I'm going to put it probably bottom of A. Then we got Cowboy Bebop, the first anime we'll be talking about here. Cowboy Bebop was a blast. It's not the deepest thing until suddenly it's going to punch you in the chest really hard with its ending. I've gotten around to watching the movie just recently, which was also very, very fun. And for me, this is going to be probably a bottom of A. It does get a little bit redundant with some of those middle episodes, and the characterization doesn't evolve as much as I was hoping to see in certain ways. It does definitely in others plenty, but Cowboy Bebop is a solid A ranking for me. And I've softened on it a little bit as I've gotten further from it, but I still love it. The newest season of Attack on Titan. I really enjoyed it, but everyone tells me this last leg that's upcoming is going to be massively disappointing. And so it's kind of frustrating for me to be like, I'm still liking what's going on, but everyone and their mother keeps commenting like, it's gonna get bad. Just wait. It's gonna be bad. Like, I don't know what to do with that, but what we still got leading up to what apparently might disappoint me was still really good. And I'll put it at the top of B. The Halo show. I went on and watched more episodes of this beyond what I reviewed here on the channel. And okay, it's time for a little bit of a rant. There have been a lot of recent fantasy sci-fi adaptations that have ranged in quality from, you know, really terrible to really great. But the one that offends me the most as a fan is the Halo show, because so many other these adaptations, you can see why it went wrong or what restriction, limitation they had to not achieve the potential of what could have been. Halo had basically no excuse. The budget is there. They had the rights to everything they needed. There was no huge rush in production. All that happened was the people apparently in charge of the adaptation said it with their chest, did not respect the source material or the fans of that material. And so what you end up with is something that has torn the skin off of the body of Halo and tried to wrap it around an entirely different story thematically, character-wise, even in terms of just like how everything evolves within the narrative. It's just completely wrong. And it's because of fucking ego in Hollywood, where they've taken the most, maybe arguably even to this day, cinematic opening to a video game franchise and decided to just do a hard left turn and bring us something that no fan wanted, some writer in Hollywood's interpretation of how they could do Halo better. It is such a clear sign of ego driving the ship over everything else, and it's a direct disrespect to the fans who actually wanted to see the just Halo story. You could easily turn into a season of television. There's people online who have broke it down beat by beat how you could do it fantastically, and with the lack of limitations of streaming services, you had even more flexibility to do that right without having to worry about commercial breaks, run times, do a Stranger Things thing, whatever. But what we got here was just an absolute middle finger to everyone who actually cared about Halo. And I know the Halo story series in the games isn't flawless, but the first couple of games really bring it hard. And they could have just gone with that and then had their egos take the wheel later on after they establish it. But no, what you get is bottom of D tier. Absolutely miserable for me, even as just a casual Halo fan who's never even gotten the books, just read the games. This is despicable. So moving on from there, we're going to go to Elden Ring, which in my opinion is borderline top of S tier. The only nitpicks I have with this game are entirely personal preference, and I get our elements other people love. Like, I'm not a biggest open world guy. Other people's love open world for this, so like I can't say that's like a bad element to the game. It's just something that's like not my favorite. But yeah, Elden Ring is essentially a flawless game, and I get why everyone loved it so much. Witcher Season 2, a lot of problems here. But I am such a slut for great creature design, and Witcher Season 2 brought some great creature design that, just for me, in my own subjective way, it bumps it up higher than I think a lot of people are going to have this. Granted, there were also wonky visual effects that didn't work very well, but in terms of its top, I'm the guy who's like watched the making of the Xenomorph monster like 30 different times because I just enjoy seeing the artists make creatures, do it practically enhanced with CG. And so for me, it's still going to go top of C. And as a buy, this show still continues to be a gift. I don't mean to make it weird, but just stating on the record, gonna put my little podium here. As a buy, Witcher Season 2, certified yummy. All right, and then the final thing. The Dresden Files TV show. I went ahead and watched some more episodes of this as well after I did my review of the first one, and I don't think it's a good Dresden adaptation. It's not a good show, but it is an enjoyable show. If you're like me and you like schlock, it can be really fun. And I actually wanted to do more episode reviews here on the channel, but I had quite a few people on Twitter be like, we're just not interested in that. Like, that video did really well, but a lot of people were like, nah, just don't. Like, you crapped on it enough, but I don't even think I'd crap on it much anymore. It's really fun in some ways, but yeah, it's a middle of C at best thing, and it's purely like a schlock enjoyment that's keeping me coming back to it. But that has been my reviews for the first half of the year, as far as I can remember going through my playlists, and it's been a really fun year. More balanced out than I think previous years, because previous years I've had just a lot of really solid recommendations, gotten through a lot of that, so it's kind of shifting back into the more balanced out territory. But this was fun. I'm obviously not doing as many reviews as I've done in years past, because the channel as a whole is shifting more towards these deep dive videos, which people are obviously loving in the algorithm, and we're also getting a bit more news oriented and skits, which I'm having fun with. But you know, the channel's always shifting and evolving, and we may have a return to normal, we may continue and just go into pure lore videos one day. I honestly have no idea. But this has just been your halfway benchmark tier list here. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe got some interesting recommendations of things to check on out. Like and subscribe if you have. Oh, I actually reviewed Everything Everywhere All at Once and I didn't put it on here. Oh no. Okay, it would be just below Elden Ring. That movie, aside from maybe being... No, I actually disagree with that criticism. I think it's basically a flawless movie. I'd put it just below Elden Ring in S tier. But this has been your latest tier list video. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Bye!